it wasn't that bad, but it also wasn't that good. I don't want to be judgmental, but I am, so I can't really help it. This is why I'm not a joiner. Hello, and thank you for clicking on this video. Today I will be going over my November wrap-up, so all of the books that I read in the month of November. It's pretty standard. I actually read 14 books, which is pretty good, especially considering my reading this whole year hasn't been that great compared to previous years. But although it's a great number, I did not read as many books as I planned and wanted to read. But whatever, we're just gonna go through the books that I read. And I did participate in 2 readathons. One was the Goth Lit November, and one was the Blooming Readathon. But I won't go over the prompts because, yeah, too complicated. So I'm just gonna go in order of like what I read first. And also just bear with me if I don't remember everything about these books because my memory isn't great. Also, before we start, I wanna mention, I think November was one of the lowest average rating months for me when it comes to my reading. Like, usually I have a good score, like it's usually a 4 point something, and this month, well, not, it's December now, but in November I had a 3.5 average, so not great. I did not have, yeah, it was probably my worst reading month, honestly. Like, I feel like most of the books I read were a letdown. And I gave 2 5-stars though. So anyway, let's get started. So the first book I read was Sign Here by Claudia Lux, and I listened to the audiobook. Honestly, the audiobook wasn't that bad, but I remember just kind of like being over it. And in general, I hated everything about it. Okay, that's a bit too much. I didn't hate everything, but the whole story, the premise, a lot of what happens, I was not here for that. Like, I don't know, there's certain topics and like themes that were explored within the book that just made me so uncomfortable. And no. I like the premise. Honestly, I picked this up because I remember someone saying like it was fun and like original. And I mean, I guess it is original, but it just really didn't work for me. But yeah, basically, before I continue trash talking, I'm just kidding. But yeah, this book is about a Grim Reaper-ish. So basically, in this book, right, in this world, the way that hell looks like is that when you go to hell, like when your soul goes to hell, you can basically work your way up, and when you work your way up, you can eventually basically like end up working for the devil or something like that. And what you do is that like you're basically trying to get people to sign their souls away. We learned this pretty early on, but if you're able to sign like a whole family, like in generations, like one person for each generation of the family, basically, I think it has to be at least 3 generations. If you're able to do that, then you can be reborn. So you can live your life again and you can make different choices so that you're not gonna end up in hell again. So basically we're following this guy who, he is almost done with this family. Like, I think he just needs one more person. And so we're basically following him in hell and like what his life looks like. And also we're following the family and all of the dysfunction going on. But yeah, we're learning more about the family. We're learning more about the kids and the parents and the parents' youth. And like basically someone died when they were young, when the parents were young. And so we learn more about that. And that, what happened back then, is kind of like, it comes into play in the present timeline. So yeah, I don't know. I think it was a cool premise and I think it could work for a lot of people. Even the humor though, to me, just was like, okay? Like, it wasn't one of those books where I actually found myself laughing or anything. It was just not my cup of tea. I ended up rating it at 2 stars, which in retrospect maybe was a bit harsh. Like, I think it could be like a 3-star, but I find that, yeah, I found it to be quite forgettable, and I don't know, I remember just like really not enjoying reading it at all, so that's why I gave it a 2 stars. I don't necessarily recommend it, but then I don't know, I think it could work. It could work for some people, but I wasn't one of those people. Okay, then I read Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. I also listened to the audiobook, and this one I actually gave a 5 stars, which I'm so happy about, because honestly, I was worried. A lot of my 5-star predictions lately have been turning out to not be 5 stars, and so I was really scared going into this one, because like I've been wanting to read it for, well, I had been wanting to read it for so long, and so I was really scared that I wasn't gonna like it, but it did not disappoint. So I do recommend the audiobook. It's actually read by the author, so that was fun, but I think I would actually like it even more just like if I just read it, to be quite frank, if I just read it physically. So Boy Parts is about this woman who is a photographer. She's an artist, and basically she likes to take photos of men, or maybe I should say boys, because like she goes for like legal aged kids for the most part, but like they all look quite young, and she makes them do like embarrassing poses, or like specifically I think like her whole idea is that she makes them do what is often done to women in like mainstream art and media. She makes them do like kinky stuff. So yeah, you get the vibe. And basically we are just like reading from her perspective. This is one of those books that doesn't really have a plot. It's more just about like you're in her head and you're just seeing what her life looks like and how she perceives the world, and also eventually you kind of see her like spiraling down as a result of something that actually happened in the past that she did. So yeah, I don't know, I really loved it. I loved the atmosphere, and I loved like the quote-unquote boring books or like the books with no plots, so it was just like straight up my alley. I highly recommend it, but I don't know, I would call it like a sad girl book for sure, but like with a horror twist. Although honestly, from how I'd heard people describing the book, I thought it was gonna be a lot gorier than what it actually was. So I was a bit disappointed in terms of the horror element, because like I thought we were gonna get more, but I still liked it. So if you're scared that it's gonna be like super gory, I personally didn't think it was, but take my opinion with a grain of salt, because I love horror, so I'm used to like, not that I'm used to seeing like gory stuff, but like I kind of am. At this point I'm not really that fazed with a lot of things. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's probably not a good thing. Then I read one of my anticipated releases, Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was another win. Honestly, I again was kind of scared, because so far I've read, well, I mean, not counting this one, at that point I had read I think 2 Silvia Moreno Garcia's books and loved one, hated the other. So I was kind of like worried that I wasn't gonna love her other books in general. By the way, the book I loved was Mexican Gothic, and the one I didn't like was Velvet is the Night, or Velvet was the Night, whatever. That book did not work for me. Honestly, I think the noir genre in general, like, is just not for me, maybe. I've been wanting to read more Silvia Moreno Garcia, and like, just because of how much I love Mexican Gothic, like, I really desperately want her to be one of my favorite authors, and I'm always looking forward to like the books she releases. But yeah, so far I'm kind of like behind with a lot of her books. But Silver Nitrate I was really looking forward to, and honestly, this is what like Velvet was the Night could have been, but wasn't, if that makes sense. I mean, they're technically different genres, but like it kind of gave me similar feels to Velvet was the Night or Velvet is the Night, but this one just did it better. And also I don't know if it was like the time period, because it was different, Also, there's a lot of talk of like cults, like that's like the main emphasis of the book. Cults and like magic with a K, like magic with a CK. And yeah, and like the film industry, and it was just, I loved it. Honestly, I really, really loved it. And we're following these two characters who have been best friends since they were really, really young. It's a man and a woman, and basically the woman has had a crush on him pretty much since they were kids. But he did not feel the same way. And he was actually like, well, he is actually an actor, but he's kind of a failed actor because of a scandal he was involved in his youth, like at his prime, like at the prime of his career. So after that, he just kind of like faded away from the main scene. And she works in the film industry with the sound department, I think. I'm pretty sure it was the sound department. Honestly, I can't remember. Or maybe it was the film itself, actually. Never mind. It was with film editing. I think it was editing. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not an expert when it comes to the film industry. I don't even know all the different jobs related to that. But anyway, yeah, it was amazing. And then it's basically these two characters, and then they kind of get involved with this old director. Like he also used to be like quite famous, and then now he's older and like hasn't released any like new movies in a long time. And like his movies, again, after his peak movie, like he was kind of known for like a movie that was really good, and then he kind of like faded away. And then we kind of learned that maybe it's related to this kind of cult he was in. And then we're following these two characters as they try to learn more about what happened, basically. I loved it. Like I said, I gave it a 4.5 stars rating. I don't know, like it wasn't like a full 5-star, but it was so close to that. You know what I mean? Like it was just, it gave me everything I wanted. Well, I guess not everything, but I don't know. It had a lot going for it. Just not, I don't know. It didn't have that factor. Like it didn't have the it factor that, I don't know, books like Mexican Gothic had for me, if that makes sense. I don't know. I feel like this is one of those books that like, in retrospect, I might give it a 5-star now, just because it's like, I don't know, I consider it one of my favorites, but it's not a full 5-star. But it would be interesting to see if I were to reread it, if I would feel differently. I don't know. Also, once again, I listened to the audiobook, which I really, really liked. I do wonder if I had read it physically, if actually maybe I would have had a lower rating, just because I do think it was a bit slow at times. Oftentimes what feels really slow as an audiobook to me is even worse when I'm reading it physically. So I'm kind of on the fence about that, because I feel like maybe if I had read it physically, it wouldn't have as high a rating as, you know, I gave it now. Overall though, I really loved it, so I recommend the audiobook. Then I read A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This was another one of my anticipated releases. And unfortunately, this was another one that just like did not work for me at all. I think I've read 2 of T. Kingfisher's books before. Like literally in October, I read House of Hollow. No, that's not what it's called. These Hollow Places, right? Yeah. And then prior to that, I had read, what's the short story called? What Moves the Dead. Yeah, What Moves the Dead, which was like a retelling of an Edgar Allan Poe short story, I think. But yeah, so I loved, well, not loved, but I liked both of those previous books. I think originally I did give What Moves the Dead 5 stars. I don't know. I feel like maybe it's more of a 4-star. Like I loved it, loved the atmosphere, the eeriness and everything. And that's the thing with T. Kingfisher, like her writing is so good. And I loved These Hollow Places as well. Except with that one, I felt like it was a bit too long, and like at one point it was just too slow, and like a lot of what happens in like the final quarter of the book, like literally when we were really close to the end, I was like, what's going on here? Like, why are we slowing down? With A House with Good Bones, it wasn't necessarily just the ending, it was literally everything. Like the whole book, I was just like, okay, like, can we get to it? It was just kind of boring. Also, I am now realizing, and I'll talk about this more in a second when I get to another book, but I'm kind of now realizing that I'm really not into Southern Gothic. Like, it just doesn't work for me. I love the Gothic genre, but Southern Gothic specifically, no. No, it just doesn't work. Maybe it's because I'm not American and I'm not from the South, so to me it's like, it was just boring, you know? So yeah, it just didn't work for me. But basically, A House with Good Bones, it's about this woman who moves in with her mom. Is that what she's doing? I can't remember. All I know is that she moved in with her mom at one point. Also because she was worried about her. Because like she kept saying like weird things on the phone, and like her brother had also called her basically saying, yeah, like something weird happened when we were there, like when him and his wife were there. So yeah, basically she moves back in with her. I don't know if it was supposed to be like short term, I think it was, but like she just wants to make sure that her mom is fine. And then when she goes there, obviously there's actually something weird going on in the house, and it's related to like her grandma, who's been dead for like many years at that point, but like, yeah, it's related to her. I don't know. Honestly, like I said, it was just so boring and kind of forgettable. I think I would only recommend it if you really love Southern Gothic, but if you don't, I wouldn't. Because I feel like even in terms of the horror elements, kind of boring. And not as original as her other works, I have to say. Moving on. Then my other only 5-star read of the month was Francisco. Oh no. I own the copy of this, but yeah, I guess I put it away. I don't have it here. But I freaking loved Francisco by Alison Mills Newman, and it was just so good. Honestly, it reminded me of like Eve Babbitt's in the way that it was like this woman. Well, I mean, it's autofiction as well, I'm pretty sure. Like, I think it's not considered nonfiction, but it is based off of the author's own past. So it kind of reminded me of Eve Babbitt's in the sense that like this was also set, I think, in the 70s. Don't quote me on that. I'm not good with remembering like time periods, but like, yeah, back then, maybe the 60s, 70s, I don't know. It was literally like Alison Mills Newman. Well, again, it's autofiction, but like the protagonist, who's basically her, she would literally just like be talking about like famous authors and like revolutionaries, you know, just like dropping their names, just like that. I mean, she wasn't necessarily friends with all of them, but like, I don't know, it was just so cool because it's kind of like the same as Eve Babbitt's, where like she would just be like, oh, I'm hanging out with this famous person, and you're just like, huh? Like, as if it's nothing, you know? I just loved it, and it was written from the perspective of like her younger self, obviously. I think she wrote this like many years ago. At that time of her life, I think she was writing it. And eventually it was published, but then it kind of like got out of print. And so this 2022 or 2023 version this year, because this one was also another one of my anticipated releases. Sorry, I'm all over the place. But yeah, so basically this new printing is like the only edition you can find of the book. She has a lot of like interesting insights and thoughts on a lot of different topics. I don't know, it's again one of those books where like you're literally just reading about, you know, her life from her perspective, and she's talking about like the people she's hanging out with, and she's just like sharing her own thoughts and opinions, and it was just really interesting. Again, like very similar to like Eve Babbitt's, Joan Didion, you know. I will say, this is super fucking random, but I kind of hated the afterword. Like, it made me, because like, I don't know. Look, when I was reading the book, I was like, yes, girl, you know what I mean? I was just like, yes, like, live your life. And then in the end, I don't want to say she was like slut shaming or like shaming people that don't have or that don't live like traditional lifestyles, but it felt that way. Like, it felt like she was very preachy at the end, like in her afterword, which was written this year. You know, she was like, you know, I found God and I'm married. And like, I don't know, it just really came across as like condescending almost. and like literally the opposite of female empowerment. So I was just like, I could have done without that part. You can tell she's a very talented author, like writer, sorry. But yeah, I could have done without all her judgment towards people that, you know, are just living their lives however they prefer and see fit, you know what I mean? So yeah, and it was just kind of disappointing as well. You're reading the book and you're seeing her when she's younger and she's freer in a lot of ways, and she's a lot more liberal when it comes to her perception and her perspective of like life and people. And then to kind of see how she's like now, I was just like, oh, okay, that was disappointing, which is weird to say because obviously like I don't know her, and maybe she's not really like that and it just came across that way, but like I don't know, she came across really judgmental and I was just like, it was not necessary. But I digress. Like, it was literally my favorite book of the month. And like, again, I felt the same way whenever I was reading Eve Babbitt specifically, where like, I don't know, even if she wasn't necessarily describing the scene in detail, like I could just imagine being there and like, I don't know, it's also set in California. I don't know, I could feel the sun on my skin kind of thing, and like I could just picture everything that was going on, and I loved it. Then I read The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, and this is like considered the first Gothic novel to have ever been written. It's really short, it's only 78 pages. You can literally get it for free online, which is what I did. Yeah, I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. I don't know, like the way that I heard people describing it, I thought it was gonna be like tedious to get through and I thought I was gonna hate it. But honestly, it wasn't that bad. I gave it a 3-star just because, you know, like it wasn't that bad, but it also wasn't that good. I don't know, I liked it, but it wasn't like, I wouldn't go out of my way to be like, you have to read this. Like, I don't know, I read it out of curiosity for like the Gothic genre, you know, I wanted to see like where it started. It's actually so interesting because this was technically a translation by Horace Walpole, but the original text was is like by an author that like no one knows who it was, and it was in Italian. I would love to read the original story in Italian, and also it is set in Italy. It was cool, I guess. You know, that's my home country, so I was like, cool. But yeah, it was just interesting though, because I've never read a Gothic book in Italian, especially one set in Italy, so I really want to now. So yeah, honestly, I can see how it inspired a lot of writers that came afterwards. I will say the ending was just so the ending was so cliche, which I guess obviously now in our present day, like, yeah, of course it's cliche. I'm sure at the time it was like revolutionary in some way, but like I was kind of disappointed by the ending. If it had ended differently, then I probably would have given it a higher rating. But yeah, but it's like a novella, so you know what? It's like, if you're into the Gothic genre, I think you might like it. Or if you're just curious about the genre itself, then give it a read. And then after that, I read The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed. And this was another really good book that I read this month. So once again, I listened to the audiobook and I ended up rating the book a 4.5. So again, kind of like Silver Nitrate, like I loved so much of it, but it didn't give me like that 5-star feel. I don't really know what it was about it that just like didn't fully captivate me. I liked the story, I liked the premise. It did, in retrospect now thinking about it, it did kind of feel a bit cliche, like pretty standard for a fantasy. By the way, this book is about this girl who is raised in this village where the women all have like some kind of magical power, and they're known as the wolves because they will literally kill a wolf once they get their magical power, and then they wear the wolf skin. However, she does not have any magic, and so she's kind of like an outcast in her own village because the king is no longer a pagan. I guess he's supposed to be, I think they mention it, but he's a Christian, I'm pretty sure. Or like something that is like reminiscent of Christianity. So because of that, because the king follows this new religion and like the people now follow this new religion, anybody who doesn't, so like all the minority groups that follow like different religions or the old religion specifically, they are like outcasts. There was a lot of like discrimination against the minority religions. So basically in this specific village, I think it's once a year, these woodsmen, which the woodsmen are like knights, but like if priests were knights, a similar way of thinking about it would be the Salid in Game of Thrones. They don't have their dicks cut off, but basically they have to be celibate because like I guess they're kind of more like Catholics in that way. So that's what I mean when I say like a mix of priests and knights together, because they have to be celibate because basically they're worshiping the Lord and they're working for the Lord, so they can't have a family of their own. So the woodsmen go to this village and they each year pick one woman and they will bring her back to the king. And we don't really know what happens, but let's just say that none of them ever come back, right? So nobody really wants to be picked to be sent to the king. Long story short, as you might already predict, this girl who's powerless actually ends up being the one who goes with the woodsman. But then more shit happens. The story unfolds, and so yeah, it becomes more complicated than just her being sent to the king. And there is a love story between the wolf and the woodsman, by the way, and the wolf is not an actual wolf, it's the girl. There's no bestiality, just FYI. But yeah, I don't know, I really liked it. Honestly, I so want to read more Ava Reid. I don't know, I feel like she could become one of my favorite authors. So I really want to read, what's it called? Juniper and Thorn. And then I also really want to read her latest release, which is actually a YA. This is an adult novel, although honestly, it read very YA to me. So I was actually quite confused about the rating because I was like it could very well be YA, you know? I think I could have read that at age like 18 or maybe even 16, I don't know. Like, I don't think it had any like really, really dark theme. Like, I think a teenager could also read it, but whatever. But yeah, she recently came out with A Studying Drowning. Yeah, I think it's already out. It was one of my anticipated releases, even though when I was anticipating it, I hadn't even read any Ava Reid books, but yeah. I don't know, it just sounded interesting. So I guess we'll have to see if she becomes one of my favorite authors. I hope so, but I definitely enjoyed this book. Although again, I feel like in retrospect, maybe more of a 4-star. But honestly, I will say I love the fact that it's not a trilogy. Once it ends, it ends. You know what I mean? Because I am really not one of those people that can read like trilogies or series, like book series. Like literally, I think this year I haven't continued any of the series that I started like years ago, so yikes. Anyway, moving on. Oh my god, I feel like there's still so much left. Okay, then this was like an impulse read, I don't know, just like out of the blue. I read Blood Feast, which is like I think the full title is technically Blood Feast, the complete collection of Malika Moussadraf. So Malika Moussadraf was a Moroccan author. Also, sorry if I butchered her name. She was a feminist Moroccan author. Wait, Moroccan or... Yeah, Moroccan, okay. I was like, wait, is she Algerian? No. Sorry. But yeah, she was a Moroccan author, and unfortunately, she never really reached a good level of fame when she was still alive. Like, I think her work was just not really taken seriously. And honestly, even to this day, like, she's not, I don't think she's like a very well-known author even in Morocco. I mean, especially because like she was, like I said, a feminist, so like already there's there's a stigma in terms of like, if you're a feminist, most people already hate you in most countries in the world. But yeah, I really wanted to love this collection, but I don't know if it's maybe just because it doesn't work. Not that the translation doesn't work. I'm not saying that the translation was bad. Like, I don't speak Arabic, so like, I don't know if it was or wasn't. But like, even in the translator's own note, she did mention how, you know, certain phrases are obviously like culturally bound, so like you have to know the culture to understand a saying, and also even just like you have to know the language to understand the saying. So like there were certain things that like she mentioned were kind of hard to translate, because if she translated them in the exact way that they're written, like they wouldn't really make sense for someone who doesn't know the culture. But then also there aren't sayings that kind of like match what she was saying, if that makes sense. I wanted to love it, but like it ended up just being a 3-star book for me, because to me it was just kind of forgettable. Like, I love what she stood for, and I love that there's like other authors that took inspiration from her, and like, you know, I will always try to support any feminist writer regardless of if they're dead or alive, and especially in like feminist authors from countries where feminism is like even more taboo than in the West, which like I know in the West technically it's not taboo, but like it's definitely stigmatized to this day, but especially in countries where like literally the patriarchy reigns supreme. So, you know, I love that I read her short story collection, but yeah, a lot of the stories though, they just kind of fell short to me, and like a lot of them I was just like, I didn't even fully get the point. I liked the message, but for a lot of them, again, I don't know if maybe it's the cultural difference, but I was just like, okay. So I don't know. I would still encourage people to read it because I think she should be more well known. And honestly, it's so sad that she didn't get to write more, because apparently towards the end of her life, I don't know if it was cancer, but she was sick, and basically because of the way that Morocco is and like the bureaucracy and everything, she technically should have gotten help for, you know, her disease and everything, but she didn't, and so she ended up dying. And she literally, I'm pretty sure, like spoke about wanting to write either a novel or more stories, and she never really got to do that, which is just so sad, like when you think about it. And like I really appreciated the translator's note where like she talked more about Malika Mosadraf and like her life and everything. So yeah, I don't know, I think she should be remembered for sure. It's just so sad that like she didn't get to do what she wanted to do, which was write her novel and write more feminist stories. So yeah, that was Blood Feast. And then I read another one of my most anticipated releases of the year, which was Rouge by Mona Awad. And this was a bit of a disappointment. Yeah, I feel like most people probably agree. I don't know, I've seen some people that like love Mona Awad give this a high rating, so I don't want to say that if you loved Bunny or even All's Well, you're not gonna like this one, but like I think the consensus is that this is just not as good as the previous two. It's definitely not as good as Bunny. I feel like that's true for All's Well as well. All's Well as well. But yeah, All's Well, like I gave it 5 stars, but even then, I think I give it a 5-star also because it's just Mona Awad. And I wanted to give it a 5-star because I love her. I did really like All's Well, but I think it was more of a 4.5 even at the time that I was reading it. But this, I could not give it any more than a 3. Like I gave it a 3-star, and honestly I think I was being kind of generous. I don't know, I understand what she was trying to do with this book, but honestly I feel like she kind of fell flat. I found it really disappointing because I know she can do so much better than this because Bunny exists, you know what I mean? So I was just like, why? Like I don't know. This just kind of reminds me of the whole conversation of like, how can you top something that's like iconic? I don't know. I remember like a band talking about how there was this one song that they're known for and everybody loves that song so much that eventually they were kind of like, are we ever gonna write anything better? You know, and I feel like that's something that a lot of artists probably go through, where it's like, imagine you reach your peak where like, you know, you have this one, whether it's a song, whether it's a movie, whether it's a book, that is just so fucking amazing, and then afterwards you're like, well, how the fuck am I gonna do that again? I don't know, because that's how I feel about Mona Awad after Bunny, because like both All's Well and Rouge, they just were not as good as Bunny. Like they just did not hit as hard as Bunny hit, you know what I mean? And yeah, I don't know, this one especially, like again, I listened to the audiobook actually, so I started reading this physically. I literally read like 60 pages and then I just could not continue. Like I was so bored out of my mind. I literally kept telling myself, you have to read it, you have to read it, and I just fucking couldn't. Like I was bored. I did not want to pick it up. I did not want to continue. So eventually I just picked up the audiobook, and I did still find a lot of quotes that I liked. And I mean, Mona Awad's writing, it's still amazing. It's so good. I do consider her one of my favorite authors, even though, you know, Bunny was just like it for me, I think. I just can't imagine. I mean, that's harsh to say. Like, I don't want to say that she can't do anything as good as Bunny. I think she probably can. And I'm sure she will eventually. Maybe even something better than Bunny. But like story-wise, and even like the protagonist. Oh my god. This protagonist was so insufferable. Like, I'm sorry, but I was literally like, what the fuck is wrong with her? Like, I don't know. Like, I understand having insecurities. I do. Like, I think we all have insecurities. But like, to reach that point, I was just flabbergasted. Like, how the fuck do you get there? I don't know. I don't want to be judgmental, but I am. So I can't really help it. I was just constantly thinking like, what the fuck is wrong with her? Like, is she actually stupid? Like, I don't want to say something mean. Look, I get it. Anybody can fall for like cults and whatever. This is why I'm not a joiner. But, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't even know what to say at this point. Like, I was just incredibly disappointed by that book. I've been rambling for so long, but basically it's about this woman, I forgot her name, Belle, literally Belle. Because the whole book, Rouge, is supposed to be like a fairy tale retelling, but like in the modern setting. And I think it worked in that sense. Like, it definitely felt very much like a fairy tale, or it had the like vibe of a fairy tale. But yeah, it's about Belle, and basically she is, I think she's Canadian, but her dad was Egyptian. So she's obviously like darker than her mom. Her mom is like super fair skinned, and like she's apparently the most beautiful woman ever. And so her whole life she's idolized her mom, and she's wanted to be like her mom. And because she saw her mom as like the most beautiful woman, because her skin color was different and like her features were different from her mom's, she felt like she wasn't beautiful. And anytime her mom would tell her that she was beautiful, she in her head would think, oh, she's lying. She's obviously not telling the truth. And yeah, so she had a complex when it comes to, you know, her appearance and beauty and, you know, looking young and stuff like that. And her mom also had a huge complex when it comes to her beauty, specifically because she was a failed actress, I guess. Like, her dream was to become an actress, but she never made it. And so I think, you know, the fact that like she wanted to be an actress, and I'm sure like most people know in Hollywood, like the younger you are the better kind of thing, especially to get started. So yeah, I think maybe that was part of the reason why her mom struggled so much with aging, because she was like still hoping to make it in Hollywood. Basically, it's about Belle trying to figure out how her mom dies, because her mom dies very mysteriously in California. So Belle was living in Canada, she goes to California to where her mom lives, and then she's basically, I don't know, I was gonna say trying to find out how her mom died, but like she's not really, she's not. She just kind of ends up joining this cult. And honestly, it was the most, I don't know, it was the easiest I've ever seen anybody join a cult. I don't know. I mean, I've never seen anybody join a cult, but like the portrayal, I was just like, wow, like she literally didn't fight it at all, like didn't have any, she didn't feel weird about all these people. I don't know, maybe because I'm such a paranoid person, but like I was literally like, how the fuck is she just walking in and like seeing all these strange looking people? I mean, I guess in her eyes they were beautiful, but like the whole setting was so sketchy and weird that I would have been like running out of there. Like, are you kidding me? Red flags everywhere. So yeah, it's about her joining a cult. That's it. And the cult is related to like the beauty industry, and like the whole point of the book is to comment on the beauty industry. And I don't know, it felt like the commentary was very on the nose, which again was kind of disappointing for Mona Awad, because it's like, again, she can do so much better than that. It kind of felt pointless, to be honest, and it was just not what I wanted. Also, even the horror elements, I think this is categorized as horror, but I wouldn't say it's a horror. There's some eerie stuff that happens, but I wouldn't say it's a horror. And like the horror elements, like the only horror elements that actually happen in the book, like happen towards the end. So like it felt kind of gothic, I will say that. But yeah, that's it. So this was like one of the most disappointing books of the year for me. So then I read another one of my anticipated releases of the year. I feel like I've read so many anticipated releases this month. But yeah, I've read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. My previous video, I mentioned how I really wanted to read this book, but I also wasn't sure how I was gonna like it because of like, I talked about Cindy's video that she made about this book, and like her commentary on like her opinion of why R.F. Kuang wrote this book to begin with. And I've seen other people also commenting on that. I totally get Cindy's point, and in a way it is disappointing that like the reason why she wrote this book may not be to actually criticize, you know, like racism within the publishing industry, but more so criticize her haters. Because like this book very much felt like a fuck you to all her haters. And I don't know, in a way it's very girl boss of her, but also I do think she could have used more nuance in the book. I think it would have made it even more interesting. And again, she definitely knows how, because like she's wrote the Poppy War trilogy, she's written Babel, so like she can do it, she can write nuance. So I don't know, in that sense, it was a bit disappointing, but like the story as a whole though, I still enjoyed very much. I don't know, it was just funny. There's a lot of like dark humor, I guess, and like the main character is absolutely insufferable as well, but I don't know, she was the kind of hateable character that I liked reading, like from her perspective, just because she's like bananas, you know. She's just constantly contradicting herself. She's so hypocritical, and you're just like, you're a dumb bitch. But it's kind of entertaining at the same time, but also not, because like she is racist. But I don't know, it was just, I love the way that R.F. Kuang wrote it. Like it was really good. I can't lie, it was really good. Yeah, so that's my opinion. But yeah, Yellowface is about this author, this white author, who basically, she's been kind of frenemies with this other author named Athena. Funny how I remember Athena's name, but I don't remember the protagonist's name. Anyway, but yeah, she's been friends with this author Athena, who she's of Chinese descent, and basically she thinks that Athena always had it like handed to her. She thinks that Athena had it easy in life. But yeah, so she basically thinks that Athena like was like a huge author just because she had everything handed to her, and also because she's Asian, so she's from a minority group, so that she's one of those white people that thinks that like being a minority is actually better for you nowadays, like you get more opportunities and stuff like that. So Athena dies, and she dies with the protagonist in her apartment, so she doesn't have anything to do with her death. I wasn't sure when I first mentioned this book in my previous video. I wasn't sure if she was involved in her death. She wasn't involved in her death, but she was there when she died, and then she decides basically to steal the manuscript of one of her, well, the book that she was working on and she had been working on for a while. And this book is actually about like Chinese soldiers, and like specifically the ways that they were treated when they arrived in the United States, I think, or Europe, I can't remember. But yeah, so basically she steals this book that's about Chinese history, and she herself is not Chinese at all, and she rewrites it, and then she's basically finding excuses in her head to justify publishing it under her own name, because she's saying, well, it's basically more mine than Athena's, like I edited the work, I basically had to rewrite all of it. So she's basically saying it's my book now. She ends up showing it to her manager, editor, again I forget, and basically it ends up being picked up by a publisher. And mind you, she was a failing author. Like she had published one novel before and it wasn't that successful, and so she publishes this, but they end up changing her name, and she uses her first name and her middle name, and her middle name sounds Chinese. The story behind it is simply that her mom or her parents were hippies, and so when she was born they gave her like this random name that's like ethically ambiguous, I guess you could say, or like culturally ambiguous, but like she's white, right? Like she's not Asian, she doesn't have any Asian roots or anything, she's white. Throughout the book it's her just going about her life, and then of course people finding out that she's not actually Asian at all, and specifically she's not Chinese, like she doesn't have any Chinese roots, and yet she wrote a whole book about China, Chinese soldiers and stuff like that. And then like the fact that like also she, throughout the book, she sprinkled in a lot of like white savior bullshit and stuff like that. So basically R.F. Kuang kind of shows how cancel culture works, I guess, cancel culture. And of course, just like any other person that's cancelled, she finds a way to come back, and then she gets into another scandal, and then, you know, it's like there's a lot going on. It is a mystery as well. There is some sort of like mystery element to it that then kind of gets resolved at the end, so that was cool as well. I don't know, I really liked it. I do highly recommend it just because R.F. Kuang's writing style, like she's such a great writer, she knows what she's doing. Also, I will say though, I really want her to write more fantasy books, because like I loved the Poppy Poor series and I loved Babel, and I'm like, but also at the same time I would be so curious to see her like write every single genre. Like I feel like she could do it all, I don't know. Okay, then I read another book that I own, A Good Man is Hard to Find and Other Stories by Flannery O'Connor. So this is a book that I was talking about when I mentioned how I did not like Southern Gothic, because this is a Southern Gothic. So how do I talk about this book? I picked this up because last year, 2 years ago, I read Pages for You by Sylvia Browne-Rigg, And then eventually the sequel pages for her. And in it, there's a protagonist called Flannery. And it's a love story between Flannery and one of her tutors / teachers at uni, who's an older woman. And it's about like their relationship, how it starts, and how it eventually falls apart. But basically, because her name is Flannery, and Flannery also wants to become a writer, so she basically says something along the lines of like, oh, you've got big shoes to fill, because of Flannery O'Connor. And so after that, I was like, oh. Side note, I love those 2 books. Highly recommend. But yeah, so I think even prior to that, I had heard of Flannery O'Connor, but like after seeing her mentioned there, I was like, okay, now I'm even more interested. Flannery O'Connor was an author in the 40s, 50s. Southern Gothic comes from like the American South. There was definitely racism in here. She uses the M word. However, in some of the stories, there was a reason why, and like the moral of the story wasn't like, she was basically criticizing racism, but then she also uses the N word in other stories, and it's like, I don't know if she was trying to be true to like the times this is set in, because people back then would have been using those words, like the N word and like other slurs, but it was just kind of like confusing, because I was like, so is she racist or isn't she? And it's like, I mean, again, like nuance, right? I don't know, because I do get the feeling that like she was trying to say racism is stupid, basically, right? Like I don't know, I get that vibe. I didn't know how to feel about it. I feel like this would make for a good discussion when it comes to like the use of the N word in literature and like, you know, stuff like that. But at the same time, not gonna lie, it was very uncomfortable to read. And also in general, the stories, like, they're definitely interesting, I will say that. Like, it's funny because like I read Flannery O'Connor was like a devout Catholic, and she had faith in God but had no faith in humanity. And I remember one of the Goodreads comments was actually along the lines of like, I wish she had more faith in humanity because it was so hard to read the stories. And I agree with that comment, because it was like, literally there's no one to root for in all of these stories. The people are all just so despicable and like small-minded, ignorant, disgusting. Like it was so hard, but at the same time it makes you reflect a lot on like people in general, I guess, and like we humans, how we think, how we behave, our hypocrisy, and like how so often so many people will like create these narratives in their own heads about how they are a good person because they believe in XYZ or they do XYZ, and it's like in actuality they're doing the opposite. So I don't know, because it's so interesting. And in that sense, I would recommend it, but at the same time, it was so uncomfortable to read. At the same time though, again, I like the fact that it stimulated my brain in a way, because, you know, it made me think. Not that it's hard to do, I'm an overthinker, but, you know, there were a lot of like good, not even necessarily just good quotes, but like moments where I was literally like, huh. But also, Flannery O'Connor, like I said, she was a devout Catholic, and I think in general in America, most people aren't Catholics. But especially in the South, and especially like where she lived, her family was like the only one basically, or like one of the few that was Catholic. So growing up, she felt very like alienated, and like she didn't really relate to a lot of people. And I think she knew what it was like to be on the outskirts of society, if that makes sense. So I do think in that sense, again, that's where her maybe compassion comes in. It's definitely interesting. If you're Black though, I don't know if I would feel comfortable reading it, because like, I don't know, even just now me, I was like, ooh, like damn. But again, it's like, and this is a good discussion point of when it comes to literature. If an author is using, you know, racial slurs or like slurs in general, right, discriminatory words because of the realism aspect, like, does that make it better? I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation that can be had, but yeah. I gave it, oh yeah, I didn't rate it. I didn't rate this book because I honestly don't fucking know how to rate this. Because again, like, there is something you can take away from this book and from her writing in general. And like, she was a really good writer, but I can't say that I enjoyed reading it. Like, I can't say I enjoyed reading the book, but I also kind of did, but I didn't, but I did. You know what I mean? There's something you can take away from it, but it also wasn't like pleasant I don't know. Moving on. I read House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson, and she's the author of The Year of the Witching, which is one of my favorite books. And so I was really excited to read House of Hunger. This was actually my anticipated release from 2022, but I finally read it. And again, it was a disappointment. Yeah, I don't know. It did not do anything for me. I think the biggest letdown was like the characters. They were all underdeveloped, including the protagonist. They all felt very flat, two-dimensional. The love story was non-existent. Like that's what bothered me about it, because I don't know, in a way I could have been rooting for the love story, but I wasn't. And like the whole time I was like, why is she even in love with her? Like, why is she even attracted to her? Or I can understand being attracted to her, but like there's no build up to the love story is what I'm trying to say. And literally already there's this weird dynamic of like the master and the blood maid. So she's literally like, oh, I should probably mention what it's about. It's like a modern vampire story, but like I don't think they ever use the word vampire. But in this world you have the people of the north, that's what they're called, which I guess they're all vampires. They drink blood, and it's like normal for people, like everybody knows about it. So it's not like vampirism is a secret, and again, they don't call it vampirism. But yeah, so like having people drink blood is a normal thing in this world. But the protagonist, she's from the south and she's really poor. She wants to escape her life, and so she finds a way to become the blood maid to a noble of the north. And a blood maid is basically just someone, a young girl usually, who will literally just give her blood to her nobleman or noblewoman of the house. And apparently the thing with blood maids is, first off, in this society they're seen as even worse than like whores, right? Seen in a very negative way, right? Even worse than whores. But apparently though, a blood maid would usually stay like 7 years in a house, and then they're given like a pension and they can just go live off the rest of their life wherever they want. But basically the protagonist manages to go into a house, obviously, and so that's where the weird, you know, power dynamic comes in, where it's like she becomes the blood maid of this noblewoman. So again, like I said, there's a power dynamic there at play, and they again, quote unquote, fall in love super quickly. It felt almost like insta love, but it's like I said, there was no build up to the relationship. Like literally she sees her and she's like, oh my gosh, she's the most beautiful woman ever, which like, okay, fine, I can get behind that. But then literally like they have one conversation and then she sees her kissing someone else and she's like, oh my god, like, and she feels betrayed and shit. And I'm like, girlie, like you barely even talk to her. Like, what do you mean? Why are you feeling betrayed? I don't know. Yeah, so the relationship, I was just like, is anybody even rooting for them? But yeah, that was a whole part of the book that I was just like, it was done so badly that like every scene with them, I was just like, I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be here. And then as for the rest, and this is what like pissed me off the most, right? Because like she constantly mentions how she grew up poor and she had to be street smart, right? But then she goes into this new world, right? She's thrust into this new world. She's in this noblewoman's house and she's meeting all these people and everybody's telling her like, be careful of this person, be careful of that. And like she's just like not giving a fuck. Like she's literally just like walking around doing whatever. Like literally, where did her street smarts go? Like, girly pop, how the fuck did you survive however many years you survived? Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So many times I was like, why is she being so fucking stupid? Like, again, I don't know if I'm just paranoid and so I'm always like, you need to watch out for that. But like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't understand it. Like, coming from someone who grew up poor, who literally like pretty much grew up in the streets, like how the fuck are you not alert? Like, how are you not expecting the worst all the time? Do you know what I mean? I was just like, wow. And then the fact that all the time she came across as like super condescending. She was literally just like constantly judging other people, basically saying like, you don't even know how hard I had it. And like, girly pop, again, you don't even know them. Like, she was literally talking to the noblewoman, which like, mind you, okay, like fuck her, I get it, like she's rich, whatever, but like just because someone's rich doesn't mean they necessarily like don't know what pain is. You don't, especially if you don't know them at all, you don't know their story. We already know from the get-go that this noblewoman is sick and she has like this sickness. She's had her whole life basically. She's bedridden almost all the time or something. So again, the fact that she's already going in saying like, you don't know how hard I had it, when like you literally know she's been sick her whole life, like that in itself I don't know, it just felt so condescending and so like childish as well. I don't know. But like I just couldn't stand her, to be honest, because I was just like, can you stop? Like she felt so full of herself all the time, and like she was judging other people, and I'm like, girl, you killed your brother. Like shut up. You have no space to talk. Is that a spoiler? Oops, I don't know. I don't consider it a spoiler, by the way, but sorry if I spoiled you. But like literally, I was done with her basically. So yeah, I give this a 3-star. Like I liked the atmosphere and I liked the premise, but everything just like didn't work for me pretty much. And also by the end of it, it was forgettable, so I don't know. And it sucks because it had a really original premise as well. I mean, like, yeah, it was vampires, but like it was done in a different way. And the fact that like it just ended up being really flat, and like even the plot twist at the end, it could have been so much better. Like it was a good plot twist, but the execution was a letdown. So like even just like, I don't know, because sometimes you're reading a book and you're kind of bored, but then the plot twist is so good that you're like, never mind, you know, now I love this book. But like no, like even that just didn't fully do anything for me. But still, if you like vampire stories, you might still want to check it out. I guess if you like insta love, if you don't mind insta love, like you might like it a bit more than I did. I don't know. Anyway, then I read, okay, the last 2 books. I've been speaking for so long. The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I had to switch. I'm using my phone now, so if there's a difference, sorry. But anyway, The Last House on Needless Street. So in this one, I honestly I don't think I can even say anything about this book because everything is a spoiler. And it's one of those books where I do think you should go into it not knowing anything. But at the same time, I do want to mention for anybody who has read it, or even if you haven't, but if you're planning on reading it, I found the plot twist to be really well done. Because again, I'm not gonna go into details because it would spoil it. But like the plot twist, generally speaking, it's one of those twists that like I've seen in other books, movies, whatever, and like usually it's not done in a good way. But in this one, it was actually really well done. So I did appreciate that. However, the book as a whole, I gave a 3-star because it was just boring the whole time. I was like forcing myself to read it. Also, I know some people really loved the perspective of the cat because basically the premise of the story is that this man who's kind of like reclusive, and he lives in this house on Needless Street. And he's obviously like, you learn pretty early on that like, I mean, like I said, he's reclusive, but like even beyond that, like he's literally like, his house is boarded up, right? Like he does not want to be part of the world, basically. He might be a serial killer is the premise. So we're reading from his perspective, but then we're also reading from the perspective of a cat. And I know why, because it's revealed later on why. But this fucking cat would literally talk about religion all the time. And like, I think at this point, if you've watched my previous videos, you know how I feel about religion. Oh my god, shut the fuck up. Why is a fucking cat talking about the Bible and talking about religion? Like, it was so fucking annoying, like honestly. And again, even though it is explained later on, I was just like, no, just no. So yeah, I just didn't like it. It was hard to get through, but I did like the twist at the end. It is very original, but at the same time, it was just so tedious to get through, and it felt too long, honestly. Like, a lot of it could have been cut out, in my opinion. And then the last book I read was also an anticipated release, and that is Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. Another disappointing read. So I had such high hopes for this book because I loved The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, and literally, again, I think I've talked about this book in my previous video. I thought I was gonna love it even more than The Dutch House. Spoiler alert, I did not, clearly. So yeah, I was just very disappointed. And basically in this book we're following this woman who, this is during COVID times, but it's not about COVID. And basically she's telling her daughters, because, you know, they're all at home together. She's telling her daughters about the summer that she went to this theater, Tom Lake. And she basically was dating this man who later became a famous actor, like a super famous actor, right? And so the girls, her girls, like they grew up hearing part of the story, but like now that they're all adults, they want to know like everything. And so her mom is like telling them about that. So it's kind of like it's not really dual timeline, but it's like she will start off talking about like the past, and then sometimes you will be brought back to the present where like maybe one of the daughters will like make a comment, and then it's set in the present again. You know, there's some scenes in the present and then you go back to the past kind of thing. But most of the story takes place in the past, thankfully. I don't know. I did not really like the present scenes that much, like the present day scenes that much. Honestly, the daughters felt so childish to me, which was so weird because, again, like they're all adults, they're all in their 20s. So like, why the fuck are they all so unnuanced? Like, it just felt like none of them had common sense to a certain extent. I just don't know. I don't even know what to say about that. I just really didn't like the daughters. I felt like their whole presence was just annoying as fuck. Like, I would have loved the story of like just the past. It would have been such an interesting story. I don't know. I understand why Aunt Patchett decided to make the story this way. And I do, I guess, appreciate some of it. And like, you'll have comments, like the mom will make comments about like, oh, you know, back then I felt this way, but like now in my old age, I realize that it's not so, or whatever, you know? And it's like, girly pop, like I'm only in my 20s, but even I already know a lot of this shit that you're talking about. So I don't know, again, it's like, I don't know if it's a generational thing, and maybe like, you know, people from my generation, we all kind of grew up in a way faster because of the internet. I don't know, or maybe because, I don't know, I've just always been a very introspective person, but I was just like, a lot of her life lessons felt super basic. I don't know, I didn't really feel like I was hearing anything new or like some wise advice from like an older lady. Like, it was literally like basic shit. Also, there's a plot twist at the end that I was just like, why was that included? Could have done without. So yeah, I don't know, I didn't like it that much. I gave it 3 stars. The story itself was good, and like the writing is amazing. I definitely want to read more Ann Patchett, but like it was just such a letdown. I don't know, it was such a letdown. So yeah, those are all the books that I read in November, and like I said, it was like probably my worst reading month. I mean, definitely just looking at the average rating, it was the worst reading month, but at least I had 2 5-star reads, so that's better than 0. But yeah, that's it really. I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.